friends. Welcome back to Joy in the Journey, where we help you find joy in every day. And we are continuing our journey through Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. And we have been talking this week about all things, about how God really can work anything, every single thing in our life for our good. And what does that really mean? So in our last lesson, we talked a little bit about Paul and some of the things that he went through in his life and in his journey of discipleship and growing as a Christian, and then subsequently preaching and teaching others about Jesus Christ. So today I wanted to show you another character, another person from the Bible. And this is actually one of my favorite characters in the Bible. And I say character, I don't mean fictional. I do believe the Bible is real, real people. So I don't want that to be taken the wrong way. But I want to tell you a little bit about Joseph. And for those of you who don't know, Joseph is the son of Jacob, one of the many sons of Jacob. Joseph is one of 12 children. He had 11 brothers, and Joseph, it was no secret that Joseph was the favorite, okay? Joseph was the favorite, hands down. Everybody knew it, okay? And his brothers weren't really happy about that at all. And when Joseph was young, he realized that he had the gift to be able to interpret dreams. And he had a dream himself, and he goes and tells his brothers that the interpretation of this dream, and I'm paraphrasing, you can find the whole story in the book of Genesis. I believe it starts around chapter 37. But long story short, Joseph goes to his brothers and he tells them basically a time is going to come when you all will bow down to me. And I can tell you, I have 3 older brothers. I can tell you right now that especially when I was young, that is probably the last thing that they would have wanted to hear from me. You're going to bow down to me. Yeah, no, nobody wants to hear that, let alone big brothers. Okay. So his brothers hated him. They hated him because he was the favorite. They hated him because he was cocky. They hated him because he told them they were going to bow down to him. They couldn't stand him. And so they had devised a plan, and they were going to kill him. The youngest brother, Benjamin, when all this went down and they were about to kill him, Benjamin was like, no, you guys, we can't do this. We can't kill our own brother. So instead they sold him into slavery, and he was bought by the house of Potiphar. And subsequently, Potiphar's wife was not a good wife. Let's say, she tried to seduce Joseph, and Joseph said no. She got mad. Her husband believed her, did not believe Joseph. Her husband sent him to prison. So Joseph's in prison now, and he just happens to be in prison with the Pharaoh's baker and cook. And Joseph interprets dreams for them, and those dreams come true. And one of them, and honestly, I can't remember right off the top of my head if it was the baker or the cook, but one of them told Pharaoh that they met this guy in prison that could interpret dreams. And Pharaoh had been having these dreams, and he wanted an interpretation. So they called on Joseph. And through years and years, Joseph found favor with Pharaoh and ended up being Pharaoh's like number 2 guy. Like, here's Pharaoh, there's Joseph, okay? And so that's kind of the sequence of events. All these things happened, just horrible, horrible things. I mean, you guys, he was sold into slavery. You know, some lady lied on him. Can I get an amen? I feel like that's maybe a little rampant in our society, but whatever. You know, it's unfortunate that this woman could just say, he tried to seduce me, and she was automatically believed. But that's what happened. And so Joseph went through all these horrible, horrible things. But now he's Pharaoh's number 2, and he is in the court of Pharaoh. He's doing business, he's running things, he's making stuff happen. And one day, his brothers come to the court of Pharaoh, and they don't recognize him. They have no idea who he is. And he realizes that they don't know who he is. He recognizes them straight off the bat, because y'all, I mean, wouldn't you recognize the person who tried to kill you but then decided to sell you into slavery? I'm pretty sure I'd recognize them any day, no matter how many years had gone by. So they come and they need food. There's a famine. They need food. And Joseph recognizes them, but they don't know who he is. And so several things come to pass. You know, Joseph wants to know that the youngest, Benjamin, is alive. Benjamin's the one who saved his life. He wants to know that Benjamin's alive. He wants to know that his father is alive. And several things transpire. Again, you can read the whole story. But I want to read to you Genesis 45. And I'm going to start with verse 4. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. But God, again, God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by his great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt." And I wanted to bring Joseph's story to you today because while we understand that the bad things that happen in our life, you know, God doesn't dish out punishment. I don't believe that he like gives people cancer and that sort of thing. But God knows the path that needs to happen for you to get where you need to be. Had Joseph's brothers not sold him into slavery in Egypt, Joseph never would have become lord of the entire household of Pharaoh and ruler of all Egypt. A child of God was ruler over all Egypt. That never would have happened had the son of Jacob waltzed up in the house of Pharaoh and said, "Hey, I need a job. Hey, I had this dream, and you know, this is what God, you know, showed me." And no. God knew the steps that needed to take. And I imagine at the time, Joseph was distressed. His brothers sold him, you guys. His brothers tried to kill him. It's hard to see past that. It's hard to see past that struggle when you're in the thick of it. But after all of that, after, you know, attempted murder, after selling him into slavery, after, you know, being lied on, you know, after being put in prison, falsely accused, I mean, all these things, all these horrible, horrible things, Joseph realized that God sent him. He says, God sent me ahead of you. Because God knew that one day his brothers were going to need help. He knew that his brothers were going to need help from Egypt, from Pharaoh. And God knew that Pharaoh would never have just freely given life, basically. They needed food to these men, these sons of Jacob, these sons of God. Pharaoh would have never done that. But Joseph, the brother of these men, the brother who still loved his father, Joseph would feed them. And Joseph realized, just as we need to realize, that God has it all mapped out. He has it all worked out. He knows us. He not only knows us and our hearts and our desires, and I do believe he takes those things into account. You know, God knows the desires of your heart, and he wants to give you those things. But he also knows where you need to be at a certain point in time so that you can fulfill the calling that he has given you, so that you can fulfill whatever it is that he needs at that point in time. Guys, we are looking at a God who doesn't see beginning and end. He sees all of it. He sees every single bit of it all at the same time. So he knows. You know, what if your family needs you 10 years from now and you can't give your family what they need unless you go down this hard road, unless you climb up this mountain, unless you go through this valley? What if the thing that God has for you next year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, what if that thing requires you to go down a hard road? What if it requires you to get as close to death as you possibly can so that you can tell somebody, I've been there. I've been there. I've walked that road. I've been near to death. I have been in that hole. I've been in that hard place. And look at me now. I came out the other side. I'm better. I'm stronger than I've ever been before. So we need to change our mindset. When we look at all things, when we look at all the things in our life, look at what you've learned. Look at what you've been able to do to help someone else. And if that hasn't happened yet, I guarantee if you keep God first, if you love God, like we talked about, if you keep God first, he's going to take all of those things that he let you walk through, those things that the world threw on you, those things that, because we are humanity and flesh, or riddle our bodies with mortality, God's going to take all of that. He's going to take it and he is going to work it out. He is going to use that to help somebody down the road. If we can remember, like Joseph did, God sent me ahead of you. Because I'm telling you, friends, I can tell you now that God sent me ahead of you. Because I've been through hard places. I've been down hard roads. And I can tell you that when I was there, I never would have thought that I'd be here. When I was in a dark place, in a desolate place, in a dry place, I never in a million years would have thought that I would be sitting here making a Bible study video to help other people live a life of joy. That's what God's trying to do for you, friend. That is what God is trying to work out for your good. So be like Joseph and remember that God is sending you before someone else so that you can help them in their famine.